Good morning, my listeners, my favorite friends. How is everyone today? Welcome to another episode of I Never Knew, but My Dog Did. I am Maureen Scanlon. I am your hostess. Who am I? I am a master life coach, and I help you recognize and elevate your self-worth for your desired life. I create a safe space for you to be vulnerable and grow. That is what this podcast to me is. It's my passion project. And I was telling my next guest, he's episode number 201, 3 years and going strong here. We're in the top 2.5% globally. And I thank you all for being loyal listeners and for your reviews and your subscribing. Um, I am so grateful every time I get to do this every single day and I get to meet people like my next guest. So let me tell you about him. His name is Steven Eichenblatt, and he's from courtroom to healing room. He is a trial lawyer, an author, and a father of five whose life has been shaped by a childhood marked by abandonment, trauma, and resilience. I'm going to just insert something in this bio. I love people who come from the struggle to paying it forward in the world and using their pain for goodness. So that's my little footnote that I want to throw in there. And when you meet him, you're going to see why. When he was 8, his biological father left the family on the advice of a psychiatrist who told him to, quote, pretend they are dead, end quote. Stephen's childhood that followed was marked by a volatile adoptive father and emotional instability, deeply influenced his lifelong commitment to protecting children and families. At 16, and I can't wait for this story, Stephen unexpectedly crossed paths with his estranged father during a car crash he witnessed and kept it secret for more than 30 years. Wow. Later in life, he uncovered his father's writings, and the truth behind his disappearance offered both painful clarity and a complicated path toward forgiveness. He built a 30-year legal career centered on advocacy, serving as a Guardian Ad Litem, volunteering for families of fallen 9/11 firefighters, and speaking to teens about navigating life's challenges. His memoir, and I cannot wait to read this, Pretend They Are Dead, explores the lasting effects of parental estrangement, the search for truth, and the determination to become a better father than the one he lost. Today, he lives in Orlando, Florida, with his wife and 5 children, including one adopted. Away from the courtroom, he enjoys fishing, nature, tennis, animals, and college football. Woo woo! I love it. I love it. I love it. Um, Welcome, 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 welcome. What a story. I mean, just that bio alone is like, oh, we got to hear more. How are you?
I'm great this morning from Orlando, and thank you so much for having me. Before I forget, I don't know if you can see this, but I got to show you a picture of my dog because of the
Oh,
titles. But I have a whole, I haven't read the book yet, but I have a whole chapter. I love my dog. So his name was Sam, and I have a whole chapter on him. And when I was writing my book, I was like, I had to like get rid of some of the chapters, or you have to like cut it down. And everybody said you got to keep in the chapter about Sam, the dog. So I know you love animals. I just wanted to bring that to your attention before I forget because I get in my story and uh, yeah,
I
I
can't
love that
wait. I
dog.
can't wait to read it about Sam because that's what my books are all about is looking at our dogs and how healing they can be for us. And that was the change of my entire story. They changed my life looking at me with the unconditional love that they have. So any dog story, Sam, we love you. We love you. I always say, tell your dog I said hi. So we start off here at I Never Knew with our conversations where we want to hear your story, and what I'd like to talk about first is what I call your knee story. And today I'm going to change it up and add this kind of title to the knee story. And I've decided that it is a decider moment. So the knee story is like when you're on your knees and you're just like, man, none of this is working. This sucks. Look at my life. I've been through so much. Where do I go from here? What's my purpose? And then on a positive, flippy note, our deciding moment where we say, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to make this into a positive thing. That's why I put that little footnote in there. So let's start off with your knee story, and you can go as far back as you'd like to share with us your childhood and everything with your father.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think the ultimate knee story for me as was I and I'll talk a little bit about it afterwards, but was I wound up in Israel, living in Israel. I was going to join the Israeli Defense Force, and I had been kicked out of school. I'd been in all kinds of trouble because of how I grew up. And I left and I went on this program to Israel, left the program and went to live on a kibbutz, which a lot of people now know about since the October 7th. It's sort of like a farm social community and everybody lives together. And I drove a tractor and I picked fruit and I worked 6 days a week and I met a lot of people and I really I like hard work and but I really had no sense of real direction. And the kibbutz had a library, and the library was, there was most of the books are in Hebrew, which I couldn't read, but there were some English books and there's some self-help books there. And I just remember like picking up the self-help books, and I mean, I was like 20 years old, and I'm like, this is all BS, this stuff. And then I started reading it and it like hit me, and I'm not good at math, like logically, self-help. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you have to learn how to help yourself. And it really and at the end of the day, when I read those books, because I had no parental support, I had two really lousy fathers, and I didn't know what direction. I realized at that moment I have got to get up off my butt and figure out where I'm going and do it, and nobody's going to do it for me, and I don't want to feel sorry for myself, and I'm not going to live here like a victim because that just doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody, right? I'm not going to listen to those voices in my head. I'm just going to get out of my comfort zone and move forward. And so I remember that moment. And so I wound up going back to the United States and going back to college. So and starting from there. Uh, that was like probably one of the major moments that I remember. And then I cover that in my book, but the other thing, and I know Maureen, you will appreciate this because I had a lot of trouble with intimacy. I had because of the way I grew up, there was no love in my house. There was violence, and basically I spent my life hiding from my father, my adopted father, because I'd been adopted after my biological father left me. And so when you talk about another one of those key moments like in your life, um, I'd been through, I had got divorced twice. Um, Both of the women who would tell you that, he's a great guy, he's a great father, but he's disconnected, like and they
Yeah.
would say you're just disconnected. And I'd be like, well, what does that mean? I don't. What do you mean I'm disconnected? Like, because I thought just being a good dad, and I probably wasn't a good husband because I didn't know how to. I wasn't affectionate. Didn't like to be touched.
Yeah.
I kept a distance. Um, and so I went to a therapist. I realized, okay, I need to like figure this out with relationships. I'm a very like one. I'm not like philanderer. I don't mess around. I'm very loyal, to a fault, probably. But I went to this therapist. I went from Orlando, Florida, where it's nice and sunny and beautiful. And I flew in February to Albany, New York, where this like world famous psychotherapist was that somebody had told me about. And it was freezing and I was freezing. And I remember like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I here? What am I doing? And but this was a therapy session that I had been told in advance, so it'd be 6 to 8 hours. And there's a term, it's called like short-term dynamotherapy. I don't know. The therapist actually, the psychiatrist she wrote a blurb in my book. But when I went to that, the first thing I did is I walked in and like I'm a tough guy, right? I'm so sorry. I was raised, you got to be tough, got to be macho, It's all good. I'm a mean lawyer, and I am, and so I can handle anything. This is not a big deal. So I sit down, and the therapist looks at me, and she says, how do you feel? Are you nervous? And I said, no, I'm good. And she goes, you're already lying. She looked at me and she goes, you're already lying. She goes, if we're going to get anything done today, you have got to tell me the truth. You've got to be transparent. I go, look at your hands, look at your body language. You're not looking me in the eye. Like within like 1 minute, she had like completely dissected she described all the things I was showing her non-verbally about how I was nervous or apprehensive, but I refused to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And,
That's a
and
protective measure. That's a protective thing that we learn when we are raised in those kind of environments. And as a relationship expert and coach, I totally get that. My first husband called me Ice Princess. And I'm like the most loving, mushy person you would ever want to meet. But in that relationship, there was no freedom to be that person. And I got married at 18, so I hadn't learned anything. And what we learn, like when you're growing up, you're looking at the relationships in your life and you didn't see anything positive. So, how the heck would you know how to have a healthy one? I tell my clients that all the time. This is not your fault. You witnessed this. This is all you know. How are you supposed to know? It's like being blind and trying to explain the color red to someone. It just, you have to like live it and see it and feel to make those changes. So thank you for letting me interject that. That's
No, that's
really
great. And
important.
feeling. I have a term in my book. It's called the feeling of no feeling.
Mhm.
And what that means is to me is I people in my life, my fathers basically, that I felt beyond nothing for them. The complete opposite of love, however that feels. It was like I was feeling anything, even hate was too good for them. So it was like I felt like I really don't feel anything. I don't feel
Yeah.
anything when it came to that. And I would try to feel so I literally like would try to feel something, like, try to, I was so compartmentalized, and I'd been, you know, emotionally beat up in so many ways. It just, I didn't have a lot of emotional connection and feeling that happened in my relation, some of the things that happened in my relationships. Um, but going, backwards, so I don't get too far afield, like, for your audience, my story short version is because there's a lot of very exciting things I could talk about that uh my law partner is always like, man, you have so many stories. I go, yeah, but they're not good stories. I just happen to live them. I didn't ask to be put in that situation. He goes, yeah, but they're really interesting. And I'm like, well, yeah, for you,
Yeah,
because you can
well,
listen.
my listeners would definitely know that I'm going to have to jump in there and say you probably did ask for those experiences, because that's how we grow as, as humans and as souls. Is it sucks that we went through that, but in a way we asked for it because that's where the growth came from. The greater the pain, the greater the growth. And I love that so much. And yeah, I can't wait to hear your stories. And I just want you to know, wherever this conversation goes, you take it wherever you go. I will follow you. This is like follow
No,
the
no, that's
leader.
fine. No, that's good. No, it's good. Well, yeah, no, it's good. Well, as a trial lawyer, I like to tell the story from the beginning. So, but I'll skip a lot of the details. Anyway, my, I was born in Michigan. My father was a veterinarian. My biological father was a veterinarian. Moved to New Jersey when I was 3 or 4 years old, and my parents wound up getting divorced when I was about 6. They were fighting all the time. I remember the fights. My biological father left the house, and we had some visitation for a very short period of time, and then he dropped us off one day and never came back. Um, and he lived in the same town. And I was just a kid. I'm 8-ish, somewhere in there, and your father just abandons you and rejects you, and then your mother winds up marrying a brutal person who wound up adopting me. And it's not, you're a kid, those are just things that are handed to you. You don't like, because I've been asked, well, why did you allow like the adoption? I'm like, I don't know any better. Like, I don't know. I was a kid. That was my house. And I grew up in a house where we had to walk in the back door. We weren't allowed in the front door. We didn't eat any meals with our parents. We weren't allowed in the kitchen. There were seven of us. We weren't allowed to sit on the furniture. There was a lot of physical violence and it's the emotional abuse that sticks with you. I got used to the pain, the belt, men in that generation too, there's a lot of spanking or whatever. So, um, and there's a difference between spanking and then anger, hitting somebody out of anger, but it's the emotional, it's the words that were used that kind of stuck with me, not the pain of being hit so much. And then you reference this, but when I was so I didn't see my biological father. I was living in this house where I would literally like hide in the basement, just get away from there was just some chaos constantly in the family, and because there were seven kids and we're all within like 4 years of age of each other,
Oh my
like
God.
so and there's all this competitiveness and just thrown together. And I know, Maureen, that you had a situation with one of your exes where there's problems with his kids. Here we were thrown together. Okay, these are your brothers and sisters and we're all living together happily ever after. We're the Brady Bunch, they're this wonderful family, and it doesn't. Not only does it not work like that, but you have kids with different personalities, violence, you know. To my twin sister and my other sister, who was adopted, came into our family, same age, and they were always fighting with each other, and so there was a lot of that. So I just hid basically, and I started working at a tennis club. I got a job at a tennis club, and I was the maintenance guy. I swept the courts, and one day in it was July 4th of 1975. Give you an idea of how old I am. I was 16 years old. And I hear this. I'm there by myself, which is very odd because it was the 4th of July and people are usually on the courts. And I'm sweeping the courts, and I hear like a car in the distance, and then I hear screeching, and a car literally hits a telephone pole, probably like 20 yards, 10 yards, I don't know, from where I was. And I'd never seen an accident before, and a man had gone through the windshield, and I ran up. I mean, it's like slow motion. It's like surreal. It's like you're living this, like in a war zone. It's just crazy, and you go up there, hearts pounding, see this guy. I run to the payphone. Back then, put a little dime. There's no 911, call the operator, whatever, and go back up there. And I they had the man out. The police came, the ambulance comes, neighbors, people around start showing up. And I was gonna just get on my bike. I had a Schwinn Varsity 10-speed blue. I was very proud of it. And I was just gonna get on that bike and ride away. And but as I started to turn, like I felt like somebody like looking at me. And they had this man on the ground. They had him like leaned against the car. His eye had been split in two. He had a lot of, he hit the windshield. So a lot of blood, in and out of consciousness. But as I turned around, I could feel like I could feel him looking at me. Like I could feel, how like you're somewhere and you just feel somehow you feel that energy that
Yeah.
somebody's looking at you or something. And so I turned to look at him, and and our eyes met for one like brief second, and he was not, he was bloody as bad. And and then I turned around, and as I turned around, the police officer pulled out his wallet and said, "Does anybody know this man?" And his name is Alan Nessel, and Alan Nessel is my biological father. So
Wow.
that was my father, um, that I hadn't seen since he dropped us off when I was a little kid, and I got on my bike and I rode to my rode home, and then went to my friend's house, and I never told anybody that I was there until I was in my 40s. And like, and so that was I say in the book, like, that's not the reunion, I had envisioned. Um, So that was
And that's just traumatizing, right, in and of itself, watching an accident or seeing an accident. And then, you know, what was going through your mind when you guys made that eye contact? I mean, the thing about children is they're so loyal to their parents. They, no matter what their parents do, you and I have seen this. Um, you as a guardian ad litem, like they will hang on to that hope that their parent is going to be kind and love them. It's that seeking that love from them. So at 16, he had abandoned you, rejected you. Here you are with this abusive stepfather. When you met eyes, did you have any feeling of I wanted to hug him, or was it just you're a terrible man and this is your
I
karma?
didn't I when our eyes met, I just like this feeling came over me, but I was not like that something was going on, almost like spiritual, but I didn't know it was him until they pulled out his wallet and said his name. Like I saw on the side of the car, it said DVM, but I wasn't really thinking about it because he was gone. And I had like eliminated him from my brain. Like it was like when our family got together, we were adopted together. So my father became Richard Eichenblatt, that's his name, and that was my father, and these were my brothers and sisters. And Alan Nessel, my biological father, he was not talked about. He was not. We were not allowed to talk about him. There were no pictures. I never saw my grandparents again. I mean, that was you know that was a traumatic it was a traumatic thing, and I don't. I think there were so many things that came at me when I was young that I would just push them down like deep inside of me and compartmentalize and just and not think about it. In fact, I pushed things down so deep that uh, my wife, I'm married now, very happily married now, my third wife, yeah, and and she had been my first girlfriend, like the first girl I ever went out with, like on a date, in college, because I wasn't a dater. I was in high school. I was shy, and then I got moved to Florida when I was a senior in high school, and so I don't think I even kissed a girl until like my senior year of high school, and it was probably like spin the bottle or something. I mean, I had no relationships at all. But I mean, I joined a fraternity in college, and so I had flings or whatever, but I always wanted a girlfriend, but I could never get close enough, and uh, which was fine at the time. But anyway, I met my now wife, but I met her back when I was in college at a Florida State Seminole football game, and we dated for a couple years. I met her family, she met my family, and then I wound up going to law school, and she's in health and wellness field, and she went, in a different direction, and we split up. I didn't see her for 30 years, and I reconnected with her on Facebook because Facebook's great for a lot of things. There's a lot of bad things, but there's a lot of fantastic things. And so I got a message from her who I hadn't talked to in 30 years saying, I met somebody online, and the only thing we have in common is you. And it was because she met somebody that she started dating who was an old fraternity brother of mine, and she still doesn't forgive me for this, but I mean, I said he was a good guy, and maybe he turned out he wasn't such a good guy to date, but that was our we connected, and I was with somebody else at that time, not married, but was in another relationship. Um, but eventually that relationship ended and we reconnected again. And when I decided to go down and see her, she was living in Miami and I was in Orlando. After 30 years, to actually lay eyes on her for the first time. Once she got over the fact that I didn't have any hair um, on my head, what I loved about it is what I loved about it, and Maureen, you'll appreciate this in anybody who's, had been in relationships, and I hadn't seen her for a long time. You would think you would think she'd want to like dress up and be, look her best and do all those things. But I remember as I was driving down to Miami, she said, you know what? Instead of meeting me for dinner, let me meet me at the track. I was a runner. I've run a lot of marathons. I'm very athletic, love being outside. And she was like that. So the first time I connected with her, she was in her, like, genuine running gear, her hair up and just or maybe she had a hat on, whatever it was, like which I really appreciated because I mean, I want people to be authentic. I don't need that.
Yeah.
Um, so when I went, so we ran or whatever, and then I went back. I was staying in a hotel, went to her house for dinner, and as we sat and started talking. I started talking about my family, and and she had met my family, and I said, well, Richard's not my biological father. I was adopted. And she said, what? What are you talking about? And I said, no, those weren't my brothers and sisters. They weren't my real blood brothers and sisters. We were adopted together. And she's like, what are you talking about? And then I started telling her some of these things, and she started crying. And I said, why are you crying? She goes, because you were carrying something around. It was so obvious that you had something dark inside of you and you never shared it. And here I met your whole family. Now you're telling me they weren't even your family and you never even shared that with me. Never even told me. And I, I said, well, we were too busy fooling around probably. So at age 20 years old. Uh, but that was how deep I buried it.
Sure, sure. And there's a level of shame. Nobody knew my husband was physically abusive to me. My parents had no idea until later. And they're like, we would have taken you in. I'm like, no, you wouldn't have. And there was that shame of my mother had always said, once you're out, you're out. You made your bed, you lie in it. So that shame is a very, very powerful thing that does make us really repress and oppress those things because we're kind of doing this sort of mask to the world. We don't,
Yeah,
no,
that's right.
nobody wants to open this thing up to everybody and be like, hey, here's the garbage that I've lived through. And
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. And especially when you're like in college and in your first relationship. But I was surprised myself, like how little I had shared with her. Trying to find a picture, but how little like I had shared with her uh just about anything in my life. I mean, I guess we didn't talk a lot. So I don't know. I don't know.
well, it
Um,
also in our generation, Steve, that was we didn't do this. We didn't talk about
right,
it. Everything was like within the four walls of the house. You did not,
right, right.
I remember my mom, just always being like, you do not talk about our family. You do not tell anyone anything about what goes on in this house. And so we were really programmed to be like, you don't share those things. And
Right.
we needed to, and thank goodness the world is the way that it is. And the reason that now I'm a life coach is we have to talk about it when we deal with that trauma and we talk about it. It lessens the emotional impact, the negative emotional impact that it had on our life. Like
Yeah,
everybody knows my first half of my life was learning, and this half is teaching. But that first half is like I didn't know any better. That was the norm. In your house, that
right.
was the norm. How did you know
That's right.
anything was unusual to tell that girlfriend, this is really dysfunctional in my household and here's what's going on?
Yeah.
No, you were in
Yeah.
survivor mode. That was just your norm. We don't talk about that stuff, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And it was interesting to hear her perspective, but then I said, "Well, what do you remember?" And she goes, "I don't even remember your father because you were never around." And I said, "Well, it's because I stayed away from him because of what happened." Um, Going back to when I went to the therapist, right? And therapy is a fantastic thing, and it took me a long time to feel comfortable going to a therapist because, you know, this you just like I felt uncomfortable being in the waiting room. Oh no, I'm going to see somebody I know, and that's not why I went to Albany, but I didn't have to worry about seeing anybody new in Albany. But I'm well over that, 10 therapists down the road. But part of the reason why we didn't interact with my father, and this is my father who raised me, not my biological father, was that when I was in high school, right before my senior year of high school, my parents announced that we were moving from New Jersey, Wayne, New Jersey, to Sarasota, Florida. And this is in the 70s, and Sarasota was a cattle ranching city, and I had never been to Florida, and I was a Jersey boy, and I was all lined up, going to be my big senior year, maybe I'll date somebody or do more than kiss or go to a prom or what, like you're lining up, and I was already very shy. I just uncomfortable in my own skin, I guess you would say, because of all the crap I'd gone through. And so anyway, we moved to Florida. We moved to Florida, and this is what I got at with the therapist is what happened is my father was not working, and he was always at the house. And I came home from school, and I was a senior, and he was just waiting there for me, and everybody was in the kitchen. And there's 9 people in my family, and he started giving me crap, which he always did, and I lost it. I completely like out of body experience, and I attacked him. And he was a boxer in the army. He was a tough guy. Nobody ever, everybody's afraid of him, frankly, everybody. And I launched at him, and I just went crazy on him, and literally, he got me a couple hits, but I mean, I was not a fighter, that's not, I wasn't, and I went at it, and I had him on the ground, and I was choking him, and my brothers were pulling me off, which eventually they did, but it was bad. He wound up in the hospital, and I wound up at the house. Um, and I remember like, I was from New Jersey. Here I'm in Florida. I didn't really have any friends. And just because I had just moved there, and I like went to the beach just I was working at a restaurant, and there was a waitress that I knew, and she let me stay with her for a couple of days, on the couch. It was on the couch, despite my, disappointment. Um, and I talk about that in the book. But so anyway, eventually I went back to the house, and my father and I lived in the house, didn't speak to each other. And I was just a teenager. And so we didn't have a good relationship. And he never uttered a word to me about it. He didn't apologize to me, and I certainly wasn't going to apologize to him.
Right.
And so it was a pretty stressful place to live.
Yeah, and I mean it's pent up. I mean it has to go somewhere, And some of us do self, harm that, but everything has to come out in some way. There's anger issues, there's substance abuse, everything. It can't stay down there forever. And for you and everything you had gone through, that trauma, it just had to come out. It was like this monster just waiting, and all it took was one little trigger. The everything that you're talking about is the impact of what it had on you. And I want to know how you decided to get into doing what you needed when you were a child, helping children and families in the way that you needed.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And so part of when I was growing up, part of what I was a really early reader. I loved to read, like just uh I wasn't a nerd or anything, but I mean, I love sports, but I love to read. And I would literally like go into the closet in our basement with books, because that way I could get away from the chaos, and I could be by myself. And I started reading, and I would read these, they're Horatio Alger books, which were books from like the 1920s about like, these poor orphans that like the movie Oliver, who, were oppressed and living on the streets, and then somebody would save them, or they'd meet some relative. They're like always happy endings, happy endings.
Right.
And I started reading books about like the Native Americans, and even I would read books by James Michener, who wrote Chesapeake and Centennial. They're books about that. The Native Americans, of course, were oppressed. So I was like, oh, I want to help them. Then I read The Source, which is about the Israel and Exodus and all these books. So I realized like I like helping people. I like helping people. And when I went to college, before I got kicked out, I started working at the Florida Governor's Council on Indian Affairs, because that's what I liked doing. Like I wanted to help. I didn't want to be in school studying. I'm terrible at math. I hated it. I hated school. But I realized, and that's when I took off for Israel, which I'd said earlier. And I realized, I want to help people. And the only way I can help people is I need to get my act together, go back to school, get my degree, go to law school, because with a law degree, there are definitely things that you can do nonviolent to help. Um, so, so that was definitely a motivator, has always been. And from the day that I started practicing law in 1987, before a lot of people listening were probably born, I started working as a volunteer guardian ad litem, which for people who don't know, basically you're appointed by lawyers appointed by the court to represent the best interests of the child. So it's usually a child in a custody dispute, or where DCF, the foster system, has taken the child away from their parents because if there's, violence in the house, there's drugs, the living conditions are horrible. And so since 1987, I've handled hundreds of cases. It's volunteer, and so it can get a little time consuming. But helping these foster kids, and some of them wind up adopted. I mean, but I've seen every type of scenario that you could possibly have, and there's very complicated situations that the judge is looking at you, and the family is looking at you for your opinion, and as so that's been really rewarding. It really has. And then so that's where that came from.
I love that you found your calling, or your calling found you, that, and so young, because some of us just go our whole lives. I mean, I should have been a life coach from the get-go, but it wasn't a thing when I was, graduating from high school. But to find your calling and just know, because your passion, that's your ikigai, where, it's what you're passionate about, what you can make money at, where your knowledge is, that's your
Yeah, right,
ikigai, the Japanese
right.
philosophy. And you just know that I was telling you off air. This is my get to. I do not care if I get a penny out of this. This is the get to. And you're so much better at something when you do find that calling. And in my case, being the guardian of my grandson, going through that process with the Guardian Ad Litem, there's a frustration. There's a lot of frustration there, but there's an appreciation that I had, and that appreciation was that, yeah, they spoke with the child. They took his opinion. They private conversations that didn't include us. And I appreciated, I wanted them to listen to him, because as you know, in divorce custody cases or whatever, um, it's always like one parent saying one thing is happening, the other parent saying another thing is happening, and then there's the truth, and the truth, it lies where the child is and what they feel and what they've experienced and witnessed. And one of the frustrations, and I want to talk about this from your lawyer perspective, is courts tend to really, I had to prove not that I was better for him, but I had to prove that they were not good for him. If that does that make sense? I don't understand
Yeah.
why you have all the facts laid out, you have the history. It would be, in our opinion, a no-brainer. The child wants this. This is the history of what has gone on. This is like a no-brainer, like this is where they should go. But there's a really big thing that I think needs to change in the legal system, and that is stop trying to keep reunification. What do you think of that?
Right. Right. No, it's an excellent point. I mean, the state, in Florida, speaking for Florida, there's a presumption they will do everything they can to keep a child with their natural parents. And 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 it is hard as a guardian ad litem when you're seeing, like, what happens is, and I know you know this, but what happens is the parents are given a parenting plan that they have to meet, which, and depending on what their particular issues are, it is, they have to meet. And if they can't do it, if they won't do it, or if they can't meet that, then they can't have their child back. And that's where you can see who really cares, who's really trying, because, I've seen families really try hard to meet the parenting plan, and the judge will normally either increase the plan, make it long, like if you can't make a decision, because a lot of times it's really clear. But there is so much weight given to wanting to return the child to the natural mother or father, even when that that's the wrong decision. But that's always a hard one for me as a GAL to 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 return a kid that maybe was in an abusive situation, and now the parents have, allegedly changed, and so they're really difficult calls. Most of them are pretty clear because, man, there's people out there, they just shouldn't have kids, and they have lots of kids, and and I used to, I talked to a lot of high school kids, and I would always try to take them to the courthouse to see what happens when you get consequences of bad actions. And I always try to get people to go down to the juvenile courthouse and see what the world is like over there. You may live in your fancy house in Orlando, but go, a mile down the street and see what it's like over there and see what some of these people, they have no assets, they have no resources, they don't know what direction to go in. They have all these kids. It's a really hard balance. And there's all these kids in foster care, and I sort of defend the state in the sense that there's only so much you could do, and there's so many kids. It's just, there's just so much you could do.
Yeah,
Um,
I know.
so
That's
it,
and
it's
that's the hard thing. And then, when they, everybody wants to adopt a child when they're younger, and there's all these children, between the 10 and 18. And, it's like having my grandson, he came to us when he was, I think, 13 or 14. It was amazing. If people would give these foster children more chances of the older foster children, they're fun. There's so much influence you can do at that age. Yeah, the first few years of their life, the 0 through, 6, the most obviously,
sure.
pertinent part of learning. But then if you can really invest in these older children, I mean, the difference in my grandson, he's in a band, and he's got straight A's
Right.
and B's, and he's driving. He did not want to drive. He didn't know how to make a bowl of cereal when he came to us, and he knows how to cook, and it's just he's fantastic. He's about conservation. It's just how much influence you can have on a child, not just because we're his grandparents, but if you are a caring person who has those maternal and paternal instincts to make a difference in the world. Like you said, there's more foster kids than there's Guardian Ad Litems to be able to help this. And one of the, I think, frustrations too is what we experience. If there's no documentation, it's a he said, she said. That was frustrating, right? Because
Right.
they come to the house and everybody's on their best behavior over there, and then CPS is like, oh, we didn't see anything. It's like, well, you're not going to.
Yeah.
You have to go by by the child's word of what he experienced. And they didn't always believe him, and I think that was a little hurtful. It's like, please believe him. He is not saying
Right.
it just to say it. Do you find that's an issue, that sometimes that the child's opinions and words don't get taken serious enough?
I think so. A lot depends on the age of the child and who's doing the questioning, because I've seen some of these child psychologists who interview kids who are just incredible in getting information out that maybe they wouldn't give to somebody else. Like sometimes the kids are intimidated by who's asking the questions, so they lie, or they they just kind of don't want to talk about it. So, but yeah, and part of my job as a GAL is to go to the house, look at the house myself, try to get a feel, try to talk to the parents, get a feel for what their situation is financially. Do they have a job? Do they have transportation? How are they going to feed this kid? What was the problem before? Was it drugs? I mean, you really have to look at that. And I had a situation, because I've been in GAL for a long time, where legal aid called me and said, we have a tough case for you. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I can handle any more of these. But it was actually a very successful, well-respected female lawyer in town, who's manager of a big law firm. She's a strong woman, very strong woman, and she had adopted two teenage girls, and they needed a guardian ad litem because one of the girls got pregnant and she wanted to adopt the baby. Okay, so and so, but they wanted a GAL that had experience because she was somewhat high maintenance, to say the least. And here I was a volunteer. But anyway, what had happened is she adopted these two teenage girls, and this attorney, she's a wonderful woman. I mean, what she took on is amazing. And it turned out that she lives in a very nice neighborhood, a really nice house. One of the girls she adopted was running like a escort service out of her house. She was a high school kid. While, mom would go to her law practice, this girl was doing stuff online and doing all kinds of stuff and wound up pregnant. And so I was the GAL for the baby. And but it was my point being that you never know what's going on in somebody's house, and it is tricky when you adopt kids, whether no matter how old they are, be where they knowing where they came from, and you do the best you can, and and she wound up adopting this little baby, and they lived together, and she's the grandmother, by adoption, but. And it's a good story, but you just never. I talked to that girl a few times, quite a few times, who was the girl that was selling herself online, and try to help her like get a job, like try to and you do what you can and hope that it sticks.
Yeah, and I think anyone that's in any kind of service industry, and I don't mean like, a waitress or anything, but I mean anything that's like pretty serious, like therapy, life coaching, counselors, lawyers, family lawyers. I think you have to have a certain level of intuition of what's not being said. I love that you had said you felt that energy of somebody looking at you when your dad had that accident. It's like that to me, I was just thinking when you said that, I'm like, he's very intuitive. He's a very highly sensitive man because you have to be in that type of career. There's there's what's said, and then there's so much that are you have to read in between the lines, and then you have to sort of make these judgment calls. And I just, you're a saint because you're needed. You're needed. People, and we were talking before we started recording, and I was saying more grandparents are raising grandchildren today than ever
Right,
before. And so your
right,
job
right.
is so important because um, I didn't know what to do. I had never experienced anything like that. And the legal process
Yeah.
is, I mean, other than
And
divorce, I like you, I had two divorces and I'm on my third marriage, but going through the divorce system or the legal system for divorce and
it's
child
a tough
custody.
system.
Yeah, that's way different when it's your child versus you trying to get custody or guardianship of someone else's child. It's like you have zero rights. It's a very weird thing. Here you have someone that these kids, like the girls that she adopted, are on the cusp of really going the wrong way. And unfortunately, she made bad decisions even after being adopted. But there's a lot of these kids that are on this cusp, especially when I talk about the 12, 13, and 14 year olds.
Oh
It could
yeah.
it could
Oh
go
yeah.
one way or the other. And when someone's stepping up, and saying, I don't want them in the foster system. I want to take them in. I want to raise them. I want to do this. You would think the system, nationwide, all the legal justice system would say, "Hey, this is a good thing. We're not going to just throw these kids out and end up in juvenile court." And it's I don't know. I feel like we protect bad behavior as parents versus really pushing more for the people who are willing to be the parent in place of the ones that don't really want to be the parent, right?
Yeah, it's well, and the court system moves very slowly. It's overwhelmed. I mean, it's overwhelming. Like we're in Orange County in Orlando. Trials, if I've noticed a case for trial, it's 2027 before they can even get to it. The court systems are jammed up. It's nobody's fault. It's just you can only do so much. We're adding a bunch of judges, then you have to build more courtrooms. You have to hire more people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of and with the judges in the juvenile system, they they're very careful to give the parent, even if they're like every opportunity to get their to prove that they can keep their kids. And and you can tell who's really trying and you can tell who's not. And I just had a case where the two beautiful Filipino children were sexually abused by their parents, and the parents were in jail, and they were living with an American Israeli. He'd been born in Israel. He's like 60 years old, and he had been the father had been like his mechanic, and that's the only and this the father, the Filipino father, like the only person he knew that might be able to take the kids was this guy because they had developed like a friendship. But I mean, they weren't friends, but he wound up. I spent a lot of time with him. He wound up adopting these two little kids. I mean, and I spent a lot of time in his house. I'm like, man, you are a saint. Like that's amazing. And for the kids, this guy's got a beautiful place, and the kids are really cute. And he sends me videos of their music recitals and all that. And so those kids are really, really, really lucky, very fortunate.
We could have more happy endings like that if the courts would just really look at the person that is stepping in and stepping up. And that's my soapbox speech for today. And I could talk to you forever and ever and ever.
I,
But we're gonna wrap up,
yeah.
and I want you to tell us where to get your awesome book, Pretend They Are Dead, because I am certainly going to get that. And if there's any other website that people can reach out to you, maybe if I don't want to overwhelm you, but like if people needed advice or questions or
Oh yeah,
anything.
yeah, no, no, absolutely. Yeah, my website. I keep looking for this one picture, but I can't find it. I can't remember. I know the page is on. Anyway, my website is www.stevenscotteichenblatt.com, um, www.floridalawonline.com. My book is on Amazon, and I shared some of the highlights, but believe me, there's a lot more to it. And I really appreciate you giving me the time to share with you. And if anybody has any situations that they just want to run by me because I'm a lawyer, or they just need somebody to bounce something off of or whatever, I'm not hard to find. You can track me down. So
And they can
so
always come
come
to me, you guys. You can always come to me, and I will definitely connect you guys with Steven. It was our honor, and my privilege to have you here. And as I always say, you gave me something that is priceless, and that's your time today, and to the listeners as well. And just knowing that there are amazing people like you out there who really are compassionate and empathetic about what they do, because sometimes we can get kind of disconnected, just like how we were. But it's fun that you can change that disconnection when it comes to like having passion for what you do, and I'm with you on that. So you're just amazing. So guys, don't forget, I'm going to have all the links for you guys to reach out to Steve if you need any advice or anything. And please make sure go buy his book. This would be a good thing, maybe a good gift for friends and family for the holidays. And the biggest, most important thing for authors, guys, is when you get the book and when you read the book and when you love the book, please, please leave him a review, because that's what brings the visibility up on Amazon. And that way, people need to be rewarded for their creative work. And when he said, you hated math, you weren't good at it, I am right there with you, buddy, because we are
yeah,
not logistical people. We are not logical people.
that's
We
right.
are we are
That's right.
creatives, and we are in
Yeah.
our left brains, right brains. I can't remember.
Well, I will say this one last thing about the book is I've gotten so many calls from people who have who have read it and realized if Steve can be vulnerable because I'm not known as that person, then I can be vulnerable. And I've had so many people reach out to me and family lawyers, and so I've been invited to speak at like University of North Carolina, at Baltimore, and Maryland. I'm going to be speaking. I mean, like people are inviting me to come out and share my story, and and expose myself, because by me being open about everything, it's, it really, and my father was a writer, and there's a whole part of that that we don't have time to talk about now, um, but yeah, it's really helped a lot of people so far. So,
And
you
it's
know, this,
hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to write, especially, because I did the same thing writing a nonfiction. When you write about your story, it's very hard to be vulnerable and put it out there to the
oh, yeah.
world because you always just feel like people are going to judge or people think you're whining or people,
Right, right, right.
your family or
Yeah.
friends are going to read it. But, when it needs to be said, it needs to be said. And I heard a quote one time and it said, if you're worried about what I'm saying, you should have behaved better. So, it's my story. I'm allowed to tell it, and it's your story. And you are right. The whole reason I do this podcast is someone out there is like, oh my gosh, his story. He made it through this, and look at what he does to pay this forward. And it's absolutely just inspiring. You are inspiring to us, and you're my new friend, and I cannot wait to stay in contact with you and connect with you. And I just hang in with me and thank you for being here. So, uh, listeners, I hope you got a lot out of that. I'm trying to cover things that are, unique and different that we haven't covered in 200 episodes previously. And what an
201 episodes.
yeah, what an inspiring thing to, and this is what I think is the most beautiful combination about guests on this podcast. It's because you're not just coming on here and saying, I read about this in a book and I went to college and learned about this. No, you're
Yep,
like,
yep.
I lived it. I know how it feels. It's why I love coaching because it's outside of the realm of the box of therapy where you can only do certain modalities and say certain things. I love the life coaching because I'm allowed to say whatever I want. I'm not
Yeah,
monitored by insurance or in any way. So I get to
right.
use these unusual methods and to be able to sit in front of someone and say, I know how that feels. Here's what I did. Here's what I failed at. This didn't work for me, but you can try it. Or, why don't we just brainstorm here? I could do so much out of the box as a life coach, and that's why I love it because there's a lot of things that are different today. Um, this is not the 1975 therapy. This is 2025 and we need to look at mental health and trauma
Absolutely.
differently.
100%. There's so much anxiety out there right now in the universe, and lots of friends my age have kids that have anxiety, and thankfully there's not a stigma associated with it anymore like there used to be. So no, but you're absolutely right. There's just so many things coming at our kids and us all the time. And you know,
Yeah.
you can say, oh, social media, AI, all these things. I mean, they're great in one hand, but on the other hand, they're throwing things at our kids constantly, and no wonder they can't focus.
Oh my gosh. My
So,
my grandson is like, Grandma, I want a flip phone. I don't want he's like, I don't want any technology. He said, it changes your brain. And he goes, Grandma, you don't understand. When you are born into technology, that's a part of your chemistry, your
right,
brain
right,
chemistry. And I'm
right.
like, oh my gosh, you're so right. It's probably why me and Steven have such difficulty with technology because we were in a simpler time.
Yeah,
We didn't even have pagers till, I was, later in life. We had
that's right.
payphones, like you said. So, I mean, we had a video game where a ball bounced and you
Yeah,
you
yeah,
tried to
right, right.
bounce the little ball back. I mean, pathetically slow, but I think it was a simpler time and these kids are facing so much
Absolutely.
stimulation that how do you keep up with that throughout your adult life and not learn how you have to learn we have to teach our kids to literally mindfulness. We have to take a break, do yoga, do meditation, and just slow the heck down. So, with that being said, my friends, I am gonna close her up. If you want to get a hold of me, everything that I do is on lifecoachmaureen.com. My books are on there as well. My dog is more enlightened than I am. My dog is my relationship coach. My two children's books, and you can appreciate this, Stephen, is my two children's books for the young readers from 0 to 7, 8, because I think influencing that age is going to really help these kids to learn mindfulness and self-care. So the first book is My Dog Bexley is Just Like Me, and that teaches us to look at similarities that we have with other people and to connect and the relatability. And then my most recent children's book, My Cat Grayson is Not Like Me. It helps us to appreciate the differences that we have and still love each other and be able to have friendships and accept one another. So it's fun, it's rhyming. It's actually about my grand dog Bexley and my kitty cat Grayson, who is a character. So yeah, it's really, I think, a good gift, a good stocking stuffer that you could give to the little ones. It helps them teach how to learn how to read. You can also insert, instead of Bexley, you could put Sam in there and,
Yeah.
put your doggy's name and help
Yeah.
those little ones learn mindfulness, self-care, and that emotions are okay and we can express them like Stephen and I were not able to do when we were little. So I'm very passionate about that. And then the last thing is my doggy boutique, where I make healthy treats and paw bombs and bandanas and just a whole bunch of fun stuff. And that is mydogiseverything.net. Everything's online, guys. We're actually today doing a really fun um, pop-up shop here in Austin. We're going to do the Cedar Park City Christmas event tonight, and I'm super excited about that one. So I love you all so much for being here, and I really, really do appreciate those reviews and the comments and suggestions. Just like Stephen, he reached out to be a guest. You guys, please reach out to me if you've got something you think people need to hear, that you can help others. You can pay it forward from your own experience. I'm in. I'm in. I'm here for it, and I usually respond to almost every single email. I'm pretty diligent about that. So I love you all so much, and I just want you to have a great holiday and take care of yourself, take care of each other. Please, most of all, take care of my little furry babies, because this is the season when we need to make sure that we adopt and do not shop. Puppies grow up, kittens grow up, and it's a lifetime commitment, just like a child. So make sure that you guys are committed, and those furry babies will find you. So I love you all. Until next week, take care. Mwah.